Thanks, Amy. I'll just do a brief introduction, and I think Dara's going to go first with her screen share. So really good to see a bunch of familiar faces and some new folks here as well. We're just going to do a pretty quick share of a few interesting views that we've come up with, and it seems like the ones that Dara's going to talk about is something that's sort of evolved in simultaneously in a couple of places. It's a very useful view, thusly. And then I'm going to do a brief drive by on some ways that you can sort of tweak some of the default views that come with Drupal to get some administrative tasks done. And then Rosie has some more view goodies and gotchas for us to look at. So take it away, Dara. I'm not hearing you, Dara, audio-wise.
Now I'm not muted. So just a kind of overview, like Derek said, and I think this is a link. Oops, go back. This is a link to some helpful views information that's in the Islandora user documentation too. So the first view we were going to talk about is one that we've made for missing derivatives. And you can use it, the one that we have sort of in all of our site installs, and I think it's now in Islandora core in the starter site too, is for missing thumbnails, but you can tweak it to use it for different kinds of derivatives like service files, for example. So I have here just what it looks like in the edit view when you set it up, and I'll just talk a little bit about each of these things. I have an example missing thumbnails view from American Philosophical Society, which I think I saw Sabrina here from there. So this is the view and what it looks like in edit mode. So there's it is a table view, and it has different fields, and you can customize whatever fields you want. But you do need the node operations bulk form field, which looks like this, and you can select here what actions you want to enable to run on the objects that are in your view. So you can see in this one, I have the generate a thumbnail for an original file for digital documents, and then I have generate a thumbnail from an original file for images, and then generate a thumbnail from an original file for video. And then I also have some other fields in my table. I have title, model. I have authored on because I wanted to be able to sort by date created, date that the node was created. And then we have the operations links, and that I will show you down here in this preview. That lets you edit single objects from the view if you wanted to do that. So a couple other things up here. I have some filter criteria. So that's what determines what objects are going to be displayed in your view. So I want them to be published. So published equals yes. And then we use this thing, node has media use filter, which I have a little slide in our slides that talks about that. It was initially from Seth Shaw, and then we put it into BD base core, and then I think it's in Islandora core also now. But that enables you to find objects whose media has a media use term of a certain thing or does not have a term that uses a certain thing. So it's super helpful. So for example, we have media use term thumbnail image negated. So this is going to show me all the objects that don't have media that has thumbnail image as a media use term. And then we use it again here, media use term original file. So we want things that do have media that are original files. We want things that have media but do not have thumbnails. And then the other filter I have is on model. I want it to be either digital document, image, page, or video, because things like audio objects aren't going to ever have thumbnails when I first ingest them, so I wouldn't want them cluttering up my view here. And then I have some sort criteria. So I can sort the view by model, or I can sort it by the date that the object was created. And then the path up here, if you want to have the view display in the admin theme, which is a little easier to look at, I feel, just put /admin/ in your path, and that will display it in the admin theme. And then we also set the role to be restricted to administrators, because we don't want people that might somehow get the URL, like just anyone to be able to see it would be a little weird. And then this is just our default result summary header. And you can set the pager. We usually use full pager, and then you can change the number of objects you want at a time in your batches that you're running operations on. So you can make it bigger, but just know that it'll take longer to load the page, and it'll take longer to run the batch operation as you select and perform the operation. And then I don't think there's anything exciting in the advanced section on this particular view. So you can see down here, there's a preview. It's telling me there's 616 objects that meet my criteria, and they're all listed out here. They're all videos in this case, because we have videos that we're processing through that haven't gotten their thumbnails. So to actually see the view the way it really looks, I will just go up, put it in here. So here's what it looks like, and I have my options for sorting up here, and I have the actions here. So what I do is just, if I want to run an action on everything that's in this list, all of these 100 objects, I would just do this and then select the action. So I would want to make sure they're all the same model, and I saw a bunch of pages at the bottom of this. So you'd want to make sure you're only selecting things of the same model so you can run the correct action on it. So in this case, if I selected all videos, I would just click the video action and then apply, and then it would run through and throw those all into a queue, and they would sort of run through the queue. So if you wanted to change this, say to use, to find things that didn't have service files, all you'd have to do is change this node has media use filter and just change the term. So I could pick any of these service file, or, you know, anything that you wanted really. And this is just a little, this is a link to the, where that has, it has media view, but it has media use, I guess, filter came from. And this slide is just talking about how you would customize it, like I was going over in the demo. And I think now we are to extending built-in views. Do you want to share your screen?
You could just keep sharing if you don't mind,
Okay.
Dara. I wasn't planning a demo. I was just going to talk about things from the slide here. So when Amy approached us about this and asked us to think about, you know, particularly useful views and tricks with views, the first thing that I thought of is something that I end up doing an awful lot, just in the sort of expedience of getting stuff done. Frequently, there are tasks that you'll want to do in bulk on objects that probably it would be, you know, better in the long run to do it with, you know, use bulk operations through a drush command or the Islandora workbench. But occasionally you're in a situation where you just need to get something done, or you don't actually have access to that sort of, you know, bulk work. And it's nice to know that there are ways that you can get some, you know, sort of large bulk operations to happen from the UI, if that's the access that you've got. So one of the things that we'll do pretty frequently with this is modify, well, I'm going to be very clear, rather than modifying these these built-in views such as content or media, which is sort of core views that we use. It's the safest thing to do is to actually duplicate that view. And I think if you'll go to the next slide, Dara, I just laid out basic quick steps for you know, duplicating a view like content. So you can go into the views page, and duplicate that. And then it's very important that the very first thing you do then on your new view that you've created is change its name and change its path so that you don't have a path collision with your proper content view. And then, you can go ahead and start fiddling around with adding and swapping in filters. Maybe the next slide, please, Dara. So there are a lot of, Dara was giving some example in her demo. In the filter criteria section of the view, you'll see the filter that are already present for content, for example. So you have the ability to put in titles to search by, filter by content types, whether something is published or not, that kind of thing. And frequently there are other filter criteria that would be very helpful to, in order to enact, say, like you need to make a change on everything in a given collection. How handy would it be to have member of as a filter in there? It's that easy. Make yourself a copy of content, go into the filter criteria and add member of as a filter. And then if you'll go to the next slide, Dara, then in the, oops, one more back there. So we have the ability to expose the filter. So then it'll show up on the view like the ones that are already present in content. And you can go even further. If you see at the bottom of this slide, you can expose the operators. So you can have, and you can even dictate which operators are available, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of customization you can do to the individual filter. And then if you go to the next slide, this is just a screenshot of the end result here. So then your view now has this additional filter on it, field member of, you can filter by that. And then, because you've cloned content, you've already got the very handy bulk operations piece on there so that you can check, check all of the things that belong to a collection, or all the things that are displaying in the view at any rate, and run an action on there. And the content view already has most of the actions, but again, you can go in and modify that particular field that has the actions and add further actions that you've got in your site. You may have a unique action that you want to add into that. Sort of the last piece of this, I think there's one more slide here, is then the default view pager doesn't really give you a lot of choice. So you've got a collection of 10,000 items. You don't want to have to operate on it 100 at a time. And it may be that operating on all of them at once is too much and is going to choke Drupal and make things crash. So there's also an opportunity to tweak the pager, and you can throw in your own page options down there and give yourself 500, 1,000, or 2,000 items at a time. This is a situation where you really have to do a bit of trial and error to find the sweet spot. It depends a lot on system resources and what timeouts might be in place in various parts of Drupal. So you'll find a sweet spot where I can run this action on 2,000 at a time, and that works well. It takes a few minutes, but it works okay. And if I move that up to 3,000, it crashes out. So I need to, keep that at 2,000. And that's just sort of it's a bit of a trial and error situation, but it gives you, again, this is sort of flexing the power that's in the existing view. And you can do similar things with the media view as well to allow you to sort of move through bulk administrative things that you need to do from the UI without being restricted by the defaults that are set in place by these views. So I think the only other slide I have is a standard one that I like to put up with all of the great online documentation. And I did also want to call out again, I'll put a link to these slides in the chat as soon as we're done here. The very first slide had a link to the views documentation page on the Islandora website, and I definitely recommend going and looking at that. I've had some very interesting success with the batch edit view that there's a very helpful video from Melissa on how to do that I followed, and I find that works really well too. Again, like with content, it's a power tool. You can damage things with it, so you need to be really careful with what you're doing. But it gives you sort of a much greater amount of power to administer and actually manage the repository from the UI, which is one of the things that I am finding very pleasing about our new Islandora. So, and I think we're going to hand off now to Rosie, who's going to give us a few more tips and tricks.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to jump into some issues with views that you might run into if you are configuring and setting up filters and stuff on your views. And the examples that I'm showing you are kind of demonstrative examples, but for some cases, I think you kind of have to see it to believe it. So I've made a little bit of demo content, and I'll attempt to share my screen. There we go. All right, so I've got two views. We'll start with the demo of field not equal filter. So let's say you've got a bunch of content. I've got 4 items, item 1, 2, 3, and 4. And some of them have PIDs. So PID is a field on the node. I chose that it could be any field really, but this is an interesting one that I wanted to demo. So I've got items 1, 2, 3 have PIDs, item 4 does not. It's an optional field. That's totally fine. But say I'm making a view and I wanted to exclude item 3 for some reason. I didn't want it to show up. So the normal thing that I would do is go here to filter and add a filter for PID and say PID is not equal to, and then type in my value Islandora : 3. Whoops, 3. Right, so our expected result is that we're gonna, instead of 4 results, we'll have 3 results. However, what we end up is we just have 2. So Islandora 4, the item that doesn't have a PID, was also excluded by this filter. I don't want to go too much into why this happens, but I will mention that it is because of the way that Drupal stores its fields in separate database tables. And so they're doing a join behind the scenes. Like it's invisible to you. It all looks like these are, distinct properties directly of the node, but they are in fact on distinct tables. And so once you're doing a join and then doing a filter, sometimes you get unexpected results like this. So the way to get around this is to add what we call a grouped filter. So I'll add another filter for PID and say, I want to show things where the PID is empty. And then I want to rearrange these. And if you are a librarian, you know and love Boolean operators. So we're going to make a new filter group and drag these 2 PID filters into that filter group and join them by an OR. So now our filter setup is content is published and either the PID is empty or the PID has a value and doesn't equal Islandora 3. So if I click apply and go back down here, we have item 4 comes back into our view. So that's the weirdness with the is not equal to filter. I'm not sure why. I encountered it a little while ago. It seems to be really unintuitive, and so I wasn't sure that a lot of people knew about this kind of thing. So I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. And another thing to mention that I really like to do is always when I'm developing a view to have the what is it called? This thing, the global result summary. I just use the default values or whatever. It tells me how many results are coming through in my view. And that way, when I do some filters or add a new, relationship or something, I can really see what the difference is that's happening in my view. And of course, this is it's easy to see when you've got 4 items, but once you've got tens of thousands, it's not so obvious. And you might be doing something that you don't intend to. So that is my field not equal to problem. The other view that I want to show off is kind of similar. This is the thumbnail problem. So in Islandora, we've got our nodes and they have media. So if you want to show a bunch of nodes and their thumbnails, the first thing to do, which I've already done, is I've made a view of, this is a view of content, so it's based on the node table. And then I've made a relationship using field media of. I didn't require this relationship because, I want to show objects with thumbnails, but if they don't have thumbnails, I still want to show the object. So I wanted to leave that not required. And that causes my 4 items, because of the particular media that I have there, it's now 6 rows. So each combination of node and media gets its own row. So in this case, item 1 has a thumbnail. Item 2 has 3 media, original, service, and thumbnail. Item 3 just has preservation master. And item 4, again, has nothing. So the first thing, of course, that I'm going to try to do is say, give me a filter so that media use, oops. Field media use. And then I will select it from this vocabulary. Sorry, this part is a little bit annoying, is one of thumbnail. All right, so as soon as I add that filter, it's only going to show me, again, the 2 rows where it exactly equaled thumbnail image. Now I can do the same trick that I did the last time, where I add a grouped filter. The way that I add a grouped filter here is I can say like media ID equals null, and that will force include any rows where there aren't any media. Media ID is always hard to find. I think I have to go to category, media, and then change this to ID, and it should come up. There's the one I want. So I can say is empty, and then do the same thing, whoops, that I did with the last one, rearranging these into 2 Boolean filter groups. Separate these by an OR. And, uh-oh. Okay. I'm gonna remove this and change it up a little bit. Well, this is embarrassing. I had done this before and I was sure that it had worked. So, all right, I'll try the media ID again. If anybody saw what I was doing wrong, please pipe up and let me know. Well, you know what? Maybe I'll just try the media use being empty. We'll see if that works. All right, so it's not working. And if I had it, okay, I'm gonna remove these filters just to show like the different rows, because that's where we really ended up with. Even if we were able to include item 4 by saying, show me things where it's empty or it's thumbnail, we would still miss out on item 3 because it's got something, it's not null, and it's only got preservation master file. So this is where Views really runs into its limitations. And the solution that I had done previously for this was to nest a view within a view. So I used the Drupal module views field views, and that allows you to add, as though it were a field, another view. And then you could pass in contextual filters. So it would say like, find me the thumbnail that is attached to this media. That is one way to do it. It does not scale very well. So the much better way to do it is to use Discovery Garden's image discovery module, which they've released. It's pretty cool. It caches where the thumbnails are, so it doesn't have to do a views query nested within your views query every time, because that's real expensive. And then it, displays your thumbnail image if you've got one, and it has fallbacks so that if you want to show if you don't have a thumbnail on that object, maybe it's a collection or a compound, it'll instead show the first child's thumbnail. It'll try doing that a few times. If one child doesn't have it, it'll go deeper and deeper. And then if it doesn't, you can have like a default thumbnail. So it's a very powerful module and does all this stuff a lot better. And there's a pull request right now to put it into the starter site. So hopefully the starter site is going to have that soon. We can write a little blurb about how to set it up. But that will help with the thumbnail problem as we know it, and the unfortunate limitations that we have with views. All right, apologies for that snafu in the demonstration, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Rosie, could you mention the name of that module again from Discovery Garden?
Yeah, I believe it is DGI Image Discovery. So Discovery Garden Image Discovery.
Perfect, thanks.
I can post it in the chat when I'm done sharing.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Derek and Dara and Rosie. Greg Colati had also offered that he or Michael would be able to also give us a quick little views taster. So I want to turn it over to them to share that really quickly. And we're kind of running over time just because of in terms of like who is going to be sharing things versus the coffee talk, but we can kind of loosey-goosey between the coffee talk and Q&A time a little bit, and potentially even run a little longer. So I want to just turn that right over to Greg and Michael.
We'll be fast. Thank you for letting us speak today. I'm going to share my screen. I'm the director of the Connecticut Digital Archive. Michael Howser is our repository manager. Hang on a sec. Share my screen. Our basic technical ability is that we can only do things through the UI. We do not write any code. We cannot write dress scripts. We cannot do anything, but we have been working very hard to learn how to use views and make them do things. One of the things that was a big problem in Islandora 7 was the fact that content managers had very little information about the collection, and there was very difficult for them to find and manipulate their collection. So we decided to be a little meta and build a content manager dashboard. And so when a content manager logs in, they come to this page, which is now the Hartford History Center. CTDA with more than 100 members uses groups to keep people organized and to keep them out of each other's records by accident more than on purpose. So when you see this, you get the welcome page, it has your logo, and then it has a menu of various views that we've built. And Michael Howser will talk more in depth about the taxonomy browser. It also gives you links to different help screens. If I was logged in as a group manager, I would get statistical information about my content as well, but I'm just logged in as a regular curator. So the view here of metadata records is scoped to, is scoped to my particular group. I only see objects from my Hartford History Center, and this one is mostly created to let me understand more about here's a filter that lets me choose the filters. I'm not going to go into the code. This really was built off the content view that we took and then sort of redid. But if I say I want to see all my collections rather than all my images or whatever, There are all my collections. And yes, the absolutely invaluable global header that tells me I have 52 collections. Another view we built is the batch edit and update for people to batch edit their metadata. And this presents them with different filters and different display on the administrative page, because I might want to move my content. I want to see different things if I want to do batch changes. So I can type in a taxonomy term. Let's say, you know, I've got hip hop, and I put all these in as hip hop, and now we've decided that we want to add, I don't know, something else, funky dancing as a term. So I can, as Rosie showed, highlight these, run the batch update, and then we'll add funky dancing as a subject to it. Another view that we've added, and again, this is very standard, and oh my God, don't look at our taxonomy list. They're horrendous. However, you can choose any vocabulary and say, do we have a vocabulary term for, account books or something like that? And there they all are. You can see that there are dozens of them, because we don't enforce a lot of organization on our taxonomy. So that's a whole different story. People can look and find in what's popular, what gets used, what hasn't been used. So this is sort of our idea, to build some views to help people manage their content. The most successful one so far, however, has been the daily ingest review. And I'll turn it over to Michael Howser to talk about this, and he'll show you a little bit more detail.
All right. So this kind of was born out of a scale problem for us. We have well over 100 member organizations, and of those, there's at least one member that's active in the CTTA. So the scale of that becomes challenging with spreadsheet ingest in troubleshooting issues that can come up from our side, the CTTA side, but also from the member side when they're trying to figure out, well, did it work? Did everything go in as I expected it should? So that was the sort of the idea of where this came from, right? Why didn't my spreadsheet ingest work? Hey, this document's not there. These kind of concepts were the problems that we were faced with. The tool that we had was very basic to start with, but great, but technical, which is the migrations messages panel to kind of understand what the issues are. But generally speaking, an average person across the state in one of our organizations, this is a heavy bar to achieve and review and kind of understand, oh yeah, that's my metadata field in this subfield. So that really kind of led us to like, let's get away from this is your troubleshooting tool, right? Of kind of understanding, oh, okay, what does that mean? Okay, I understand it, but it's harder for most casual users to do that, which led us to creating our first iteration of this daily ingest review 1.0 view. And the focus of it, first and foremost right now for phase 1, is objects ingested with media. So this doesn't include collections, this doesn't include page content, but it would include the pages, it does include digital documents, video, audio, the common things that we were seeing as problems. We rewrite the messages to be success and fail versus providing the information in the field. So that gives a real quick visual of did this work or did it not work? We include thumbnails of the ingested media. That way they can visually see very quickly, no thumbnail was generated. That might mean that there's an issue with uploading that media. Let me look to see if that was a failure. Yes, it was, and go from there. It includes our 2 common paragraph issues, origin information and notes. That's where 90% of our metadata issues always seem to crop up, is in one of those 2 fields. So they can see that visually very quickly. And it's focused on today, but they can look at other date ranges as well. And this is just a quick example of what this view looks like in the system, and I'll show more detail here in just a moment. But you can see the node ID, the ingested date, the success or failure of the metadata ingest that we're rewriting there, the parent that was assigned, and the title, so they can go and quickly look at that object. The held by, if one was assigned or not, really that's the critical one for us because that's required. So we want to see success, what type of document it is. If there were derivatives created, you can see those media types here as well. And in this case, this document actually failed. So it's very quick to find out, oh, I forgot to put the file in the upload folder, and then re-ingest that. This is what the view looks like as a whole. I'll just kind of high level talk about it here. And this is first version, so I'm hearing some efficiencies that I'm learning today from our conversation, which will influence this even further. But you can see our fields listed here. The big one was this authored on, setting that as today to be able to have a quick loading view, because we might have 100, 200, 300, 500 or more objects loaded in a day, and to keep that view nice and light in the group, because these are all individual to each group. So the keeping it today is making that very quick review process and gets them in a good habit of checking their work after the ingest completes. But that gives you an idea of the fields that we've done in this first ones and some of the relationships as well. Media relationships, because our instance of Islandora has paragraphs. So we've got note, paragraph in there, and origin information paragraph to create those relationships so we can display it into that. You can see just off screen here, it actually will visually show them what that looks like. So the immediate findings from doing this, I'm getting a lot less Slack messages, but when I do get a Slack message, it's harder. So I've taken the easy ones away from me and helping in troubleshooting, and now focus more on the harder things to troubleshoot. But members are quickly being able to do this, which is helping us with our scale from a staffing as well as a system side. So that's what we are experimenting with. And thanks for the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about this view that we're developing here.
Thank you very much to all of our presenters. I think this is really great to see what people are doing with views. These are clearly not like beginning views, and so I think some of the Islandora documentation does cover that. I think now we want to move into sort of our coffee talk, which can also include Q&A for our presenters. So what basically, in terms of coffee talk, this is really a time for us to share questions or use cases or experiences having to do with views, views functionality, implementations of views. There were a couple of questions that I had sort of put together as sort of a starter set, and they're in that shared notes document, and I can also just sort of stick them in the chat. Basically, kind of actually, no, I'll stick them in the chat, but right now what I'm going to do is just open the floor here for any questions or comments on the presentations, and for folks to raise their own use cases or questions, and then we can kind of return to those that are in the chat or in the document if needed, but I don't want to like foreclose or steer things away from things that people want to ask. So please, the floor is open. If you have questions, comments, use cases, scenarios related to views that you want to bring up, or questions of our presenters, who again, thank you all very much for your presentations.
If I could say something, I think the use of views has transformed our ability to let our content managers manage their content, because using the public facing side of things, it's not built for that. And no content manager wants to look at that. They want to see all their stuff lined up in ways that they can compare it and understand it. So building views, and we spend a lot of time talking to our users. Like, okay, we put this view together. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? What do you want to see there? And views in modern Islandora is like so much easier than the old system, at least for us. But I think views really help management and also data exchange.
I'll go ahead and stop the recording so that we're not, people can raise questions or issues that maybe aren't for the public.